It was quiet the morning Milo was born. The kind of quiet that only happens before something is taken. June had labored through the night, her breath heavy and uneven in the dark. Her body knew what to do, even if her world didn't allow space for gentleness. When Milo finally slipped into the hay-strewn straw beneath her, the world tilted for a moment. Not in pain, not in fear, but in awe. She leaned down slowly, almost afraid to break the silence, and began licking him clean. Slow strokes, trembling with exhaustion and instinct. Milo was still slick with life, legs wobbly and unsure, but he nuzzled toward her warmth like it was the only thing that had ever made sense. And for a few stolen minutes, it was. No one else was there yet, just mother and son, their breathing in rhythm, their bodies learning each other. She made a sound then, not quite a moo, but something lower, deeper. A sound that had never come from her before, but came out now, without thought. It meant, I see you, I know you, you are mine. But the door slammed, boots thudded on the concrete, the metal latch clicked, and the world changed again. They took him before he had even learned how to walk properly. Two men came in, gloved hands, no words. June stood over Milo, her massive body tense, eyes wide. She tried to block them, stepped sideways, pushed her weight forward, bellowed louder than she ever had. But the halter was already on her, the gate already open. They dragged Milo by the legs. He cried out, not a sound of recognition, but confusion. A tiny, helpless noise that sounded too human, the kind that should stop hands in mid-motion, but theirs didn't. The door slammed again, only this time it stayed shut. June stood frozen for minutes, then turned, then paced. She searched the corners of her pen. Again, again, again. She bellowed until her voice cracked, hoarse with disbelief, but Milo was gone. On the other side of the barn, Milo lay in a plastic, igloo-shaped hutch, on straw that smelled of bleach instead of his mother. He didn't know what hunger was, but it gnawed at him. He didn't know what loneliness was either, but he would. They would feed him formula later. Not June's milk. Her milk was already being pumped and bottled for shelves somewhere far from here. He wouldn't know her smell again, or her warmth, or the sounds she made that morning. She wouldn't stop calling for him, but no one came. And he, small and confused and shaking, stopped answering. Because that's how it works. Not in violence, not with screams, but in silence. That's where the harm settles. In silence, Milo stopped crying. He stopped kicking his legs when he heard footsteps. He stopped lifting his head when another calf was dragged in beside him. His world had shrunk to a square of straw, a metal fence, and the echo of a voice he could no longer find. June, on the other side of the barn, did not stop. Her hooves wore deep grooves into the concrete floor. She would not eat, would not rest. She faced the same gate over and over again, as if willing it to reopen. But no one came. The workers didn't speak her name. They didn't look her in the eye. She was a number, and her grief was an inconvenience. They pumped her milk as she cried. Day after day, Milo and June lived parallel lives, so close and yet never touching. He grew weaker. She grew quieter. Their bond, once vibrant and new, was fading like breath on glass. Until one night, something shifted. It started with a sound, a softer voice, a flashlight that didn't burn, but scanned gently, a hand that didn't grab, but hesitated. A woman stood at the edge of Milo's hutch. She knelt. She whispered. And for the first time in days, Milo moved. Just his head. Just enough. And in the barn across the field, June lifted hers. She didn't know why. Couldn't see through the walls. Couldn't smell him anymore. But something in the air, the shift of movement, a rhythm unfamiliar, pulled her out of her stupor. She turned her head. She listened. And for a moment, she waited. Milo had not stood in 2 days. His legs were thin, his belly bloated from powdered milk that didn't belong to her. But when the flashlight paused and the soft voice returned, when fingers touched his fur like they knew it had once been sacred, he tried. First a twitch, then a stagger, then he fell. But that didn't matter, because someone finally saw him as more than a product. The woman, her name was Dana, had visited dozens of farms, had filmed hidden footage, filed reports, written letters no one answered. She had seen worse, but not like this. Not this small face, not this silence. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She just opened the hatch and sat down in the straw. Milo crawled into her lap. Across the barn, June bellowed again, once. The sound sharp, desperate, but somehow certain. The night grew long. The stars blinked above as if unsure they were allowed to watch. And in that quiet, Dana made a decision she couldn't take back. She wasn't supposed to. The cameras weren't rolling. There were laws. There were risks. But Milo's head on her knee, warm, barely breathing, still trying, spoke louder than any consequence ever could. She stood, wrapped him in her coat, moved without looking back. And somewhere across the field, June began to pace again. Faster now, stronger. Something in her chest thudded against her ribs like it remembered. They would not meet tonight, but something in the universe had shifted. Because now, someone knew. Not in theory, not in policy documents or grainy footage from a hidden camera, but in the weight of a fragile calf breathing against her chest, in the way his ribs rose with effort, in the smell of sour formula and ammonia clinging to his fur, in the quiet gasp he made when she wrapped him in warmth for the first time in his life. Dana didn't stop walking. She passed empty crates, stacks of tubing, milking machines still slick with use. She passed rows of stalls where mothers like June stood in silence, eyes dim, teats raw, backs arched from endless cycles of birth and loss. Some turned their heads as she passed, catching a glimpse of the coat, of the lump moving inside it, of the shape they had once made too, just days before. And in one stall, June didn't move. She watched her, watched him. Her body leaned slightly toward the gate, as if muscle memory alone could carry her forward. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Not this time, because grief takes shape in silence too. The kind that crushes the chest inward, the kind that makes the body forget how to hope, just to survive. But even in that silence, Dana met her eyes. And what passed between them was not pity, not apology, but recognition that something sacred had been broken in both of them, and that it did not have to end that way. She whispered, "I'll come back." She didn't know how, she didn't know when, but she meant it, because Milo wasn't the only one. There were dozens more. Some no older than him, some already hollow-eyed and broken in ways time would never fix. Some had stopped standing, some had stopped looking up. They lay in plastic hutches that baked in the summer and froze in the winter, their cries barely louder than the hum of the machines they were born to serve. And their mothers stood just yards away, udders swollen, milk pulsing in veins that led not to their calves but to tubes, cold metal, factory lines, shelves full of cartons that smiled with words like natural and pure, while behind them, an entire lineage of love had been severed. Dana saw it now, not just in Milo, but everywhere. She saw it in June's stall, still and haunted. She saw it in the charts on the barn walls, where birth dates and removal times were listed like clockwork. She saw it in herself, too. In the ache that would not leave her chest since she walked into that place. In the rage that didn't want revenge, only reversal. She'd come to document. She ended up breaking the rules. And in that one act, in that one calf she refused to leave behind, she felt something shift, not just in the barn, but in her. Because the truth is, cruelty thrives in patterns, silence, routine, but so does compassion. And sometimes, all it takes to break the cycle is for one person to stop participating in it, not loudly, not perfectly, but deliberately. Dana didn't storm into the corporate offices. She didn't chain herself to the gates. She simply chose in that moment to carry a small, trembling life out of a place it never should have entered. And because she did, Milo breathed. He didn't grow strong overnight. His legs still buckled. His lungs still crackled in the cold. But each day he learned that the world could be gentler than the one he was born into. That touch didn't have to hurt. That milk could come warm, not forced. That there were hands that fed and held without demand. June didn't know where he had gone. She only knew that a part of her had vanished. But she changed too. She stopped pacing. She stopped calling out. And instead, she waited. Not because she expected miracles, but because somewhere inside her, she recognized the rhythm of something lost. Not erased, because memory lingers. In the way her body turned at the slightest sound. In the way her breath hitched when another calf cried. In the way she still leaned toward the gate, long after everyone else forgot she was a mother. Milo's name was never called again on the farm's records. His file was marked removed, unknown cause. And the system moved on. Because it always does, unless someone keeps remembering. And Dana did. Every time she looked into his eyes, now brighter. Every time he pressed his head into her side without flinching. Every time he took one more step toward trust, she remembered. And in that remembering, she began telling others. Not with horror, not with blame, but with a story. A story about a calf who almost wasn't, and the mother who never forgot him. She had no calendar, no photographs, no scent left behind on the straw. But somewhere deep in her bones, June kept a rhythm that once matched his. The way she moved, slower now, carried the memory of weight once curled beside her. The space where her body used to bend to shield his. The shadow she still searched for when dusk came too quickly. She wasn't loud anymore. Grief had taken her voice and folded it inward, not as surrender, but as preservation. Every calf born after Milo was met with silence. She'd sniff, maybe nuzzle, but never again did she call out. Never again did she wait by the gate when they were taken. As if a part of her had learned the truth no animal should ever have to learn. That not every cry brings someone running. But what she did do, what she always did, was stand at the same corner of the barn each morning. The place where she'd last seen Dana walk away with him. She would stand there just as the light crept in, facing the distance, unmoving. Watching, waiting, not for reunion, but for meaning. Because love doesn't always seek return. Sometimes it just wants to be remembered. And in that stillness, June became more than another number in the dairy cycle. She became the quiet protest, the witness left behind, the mother who mourned not with screams, but with presence. And outside that farm, beyond the fences and concrete, Milo grew. He learned to run unevenly, then evenly, to eat grass and not grain, to lie in the sun and trust it wouldn't be taken. And in the moments he startled awake from dreams he couldn't name, he would walk in circles, small ones, always returning to a single patch of earth where the wind felt familiar, where memory felt warm, where love had once wrapped around him and never really let go. Because that's the thing about real connection. It doesn't need fences or names or even touch to endure. It lives in the unseen, the unspoken, the space between what was and what still aches to be. For Milo, it lingered in the way he never strayed too far from the tree line, in the soft grunt he made when the wind picked up in late spring, in the way he pressed his nose to the earth before lying down, as if listening for something deeper than sound. And for June, it lived in her refusal to stop remembering. Even when no one else did, even when her milk was taken again and again, even when her legs grew tired from standing and her eyes dulled from waiting, she still turned toward that corner of the barn every morning, as if love had etched a map inside her, and her body simply followed. Time passed. Other calves came and went. New workers arrived, unaware of what had been lost. But June remained, silent and steady, a presence so consistent it became invisible to those who didn't know how to see grief shaped like devotion. But Dana knew. Every photo she shared, every word she spoke, every time she stood before a crowd and began with, "There was this calf." She was keeping June alive, not just as a mother who had lost, but as a mother who never gave up. Because love, in its purest form, doesn't always come with rescue stories or happy endings. Sometimes it looks like standing in the same spot day after day, holding space for a reunion that may never come, just in case it does. And that is where the story truly begins. Not in the barn, not in the hutch, not in the sterile pages of a report filed and forgotten, but in the quiet shift that happens when someone dares to care beyond convenience. Milo became more than a rescue. He became a question people couldn't ignore. Children looked at him and asked why a baby would be taken from his mother. Teenagers heard his story and wondered what their choices had to do with a calf's tears. Adults, so used to turning away, paused, just long enough to feel something stir. He wasn't just a face on a pamphlet anymore. He was proof that survival was possible, that empathy was contagious, that even the smallest voice, once heard, could ripple louder than any slogan or statistic. In June, she remained a whisper in the wind to most, but to Dana, she was the root, the beginning, the reason. Her presence haunted Dana's words in every talk she gave, in every reform she lobbied for. In every tear she saw someone else shed for a calf they had never met. It was never just about one animal. It never is. It's about what we choose to see once we know where suffering hides. About what we're willing to do when we realize our comfort has come at a cost we never meant to pay. And that's the real story. The one that doesn't end when Milo walks through green fields or when Dana posts another photo. It's the one that begins every time someone else says, "I didn't know," and then asks, "What can I do?" Because maybe, just maybe, that's how the cycle finally breaks. Not with noise, not with anger, but with clarity, the kind that doesn't demand perfection, only presence. Because once you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. The chain around June's life wasn't made of iron. It was built from silence, routine, and 1,000 tiny justifications. It's just the way things are. It's how it's always been. They don't feel like we do. But Milo proved otherwise. He cried when he was taken. He trembled when he was touched. He learned to recognize the sound of Dana's footsteps and leaned into her hand, not because he was trained to, but because he trusted her. And trust? That doesn't grow in cages. It grows in freedom, in safety, in the simple, sacred right to be held without being used. That's what the cycle stole. From him, from her, from so many others like them. But it didn't succeed because someone somewhere said no more. And it didn't take millions of people. Just one person to look, one person to care, one person to say, "I choose differently." And that choice didn't erase what had happened, but it created something new. A place, a space, a future that hadn't existed before. Not just for Milo, but for others to follow. Because when the cycle breaks, it doesn't shatter like glass. It bends, it gives, it makes room for life that no longer has to be hidden, for mothers who don't have to forget, for babies who get to stay, to wake up to the same scent each morning, the warmth of a mother who never had to be taken, to stumble through first steps with someone waiting, not to take, but to guide, to nurse without fear, to nap under open skies, not fluorescent lights, to belong, not to a system, not to a profit margin, but to each other. That's the world Milo found, and it's the world June never stopped hoping for. Even when the others forgot her, even when her legs ached from standing, and the ghosts of her past calves flickered through every empty stall, she never stopped turning to that same corner each morning. Not out of habit, not out of denial, but because somewhere deep in her, something sacred remained unbroken. Hope, not the loud, triumphant kind, the quiet kind, the kind that whispers, maybe not for me, but maybe for the next. And she was right, because one day another calf was born, and this time Dana didn't look away. She stayed. She stood between the new mother and the gate, and when they came with their clipboard and gloves, she said, "Not this one." It wasn't defiance, it was devotion, a small stand in a system built to forget. And somehow, that was enough. Enough to let one calf stay, enough to let one mother heal, enough to remind anyone who saw that cycles don't end in silence. They end when someone decides to listen to it and still choose compassion, not out of pity, not out of guilt, but because once you understand, truly understand, what was taken, you begin to see how much can still be given. Compassion isn't passive. It's not the absence of harm. It's the presence of care. It's Dana sitting in the straw, hours after the others have left, her hand resting on June's neck, whispering things no one else hears. It's choosing to read the label, to ask the question, to pause before the purchase. It's the silent protest of saying, I see you, in a world designed to turn away. It's knowing the names of the animals behind the numbers. It's remembering that June had a rhythm to her breathing when Milo was close, and that he had a favorite patch of sun by the fence where he'd curl up like he was still being held. It's realizing that change won't come from massive declarations or sweeping laws alone. It will come from choices made in grocery aisles, in conversations, in moments where no one else is watching. Because every system built on suffering relies on silence to survive. And silence is a choice too. But so is compassion. So is showing up. So is saying, I won't be a part of this anymore. And that decision, whispered in the quiet corners of ordinary lives, can echo louder than any campaign, louder than any billboard. It can build sanctuaries where there were once slaughterhouses. It can grow futures where there were only endings. It can keep calves with their mothers, and mothers with their memories. June no longer waits by the gate. She doesn't have to, because Milo runs now. Legs strong, eyes bright, heart unafraid. Not because he was rescued, but because he was allowed to remain whole, unseparated, unbroken, unused. They move together through grass that has never known the weight of sorrow, through mornings that no longer begin with cries and end in silence, through a world rebuilt inch by inch on the decision to care. And Dana? She still visits. She brings new volunteers who whisper, I didn't know. And she nods, not with bitterness, but with the quiet understanding of someone who once didn't either. Then she points to June, to Milo, and she says, now you do. Because knowing is where it starts. But what we choose to do with that knowing, that's where everything changes. Not just for one mother, one calf, but for all of them. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Choose kindness, choose awareness, and next time you reach for something labeled dairy, remember Milo and June. Their story doesn't have to be repeated, not if you choose differently.